Hello and welcome to the RTO Show. I'm your host, Pete Shau, and we are doing the Legends series. Today we are talking to none other than the legend, Trooper Earle, all the way from Premiere. How's it going today, Trooper? I hear that you got so much going on this week, but I'm glad you got time to sit with us. How's it going today?
Outstanding. It's a busy week, but outstanding. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
So I wanted to take us back a little bit because these Legend series are a little bit more about what happened and what got you here versus now and going forward. Of course, we'll tackle that a little bit later, but let's get started with where did Trooper Earle decide, rent to own is what I want to do. Usually when we're talking about people that started and they make it to the Legend series, rent to own wasn't on their radar. And then something happened, some event, some situation, some person brought them into the idea of rent to own, and then lo and behold, they take it, it takes foot, and it just takes off. Where were you when rent to own finally, you caught the rent to own bug?
That's probably very appropriate. I just needed a job. So I got a college degree. I got out of college, started looking for things that I wanted to do with my college degree. Ended up bartending for a while, and then my brother ran into I started with ColorTyme, that network. And my brother ran into a ColorTyme franchisee that said, I'm looking for, a new manager at the store. And they were actually talking about a concept that I would be a kind of a junior partner in. And my older brother encouraged me to go get a job. And that's what I did. And I never left. So
that's usually how it starts. I'm telling you, when I talk to the Legends, that's usually how it starts. The rent to own was never on the radar. And then some situation caused him to go into it. And before you knew it, that's the direction that life took. I did the same thing myself, believe it or not. Now, I'm not where you are, but 21 years ago, I actually did the exact same thing. I was working as a teller at a bank, and somebody was doing their job. They were going the rounds, and they were talking to people that they thought would fit. And I was like, I'm not interested, but I will stop by. And all it took was one conversation, and 21 years later, here we are. So, got a question for you. So, what year was this? What year were they talking to you about this that you decided ColorTyme was a good idea?
1983.
So, in '83, your brother says, you know what, I think you should do something a little bit more permanent. He introduced you to the ColorTyme guys, and you come on. Now, how long did you spend with ColorTyme?
Well, I was with ColorTyme for, I think, a total of 9 years. So I started off as a manager trainee, and it was 1 week, and then they throw you at a store, and then I was a store manager for a year, and then I became a multi-store manager for a 3-store chain for another year. And then, so that was about 2 years from that point where I actually worked for somebody. And then that owner, along with another ColorTyme person, said, hey, we think that you're talented to make this successful. You want to go open up stores, and we'll give you a piece of the action. So I got a junior equity position. And I said, sure. I said, what do I need to do? And it's basically the same thing you're doing now. I said, and I get equity? And I said, sure. So,
oh my goodness, who would turn that down?
Yeah, so I went in 1985, in the summer of 85, I opened up my first store in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It took off so fast that within 4 months, they said, let's open another one in Manassas, Virginia. That took off actually faster than the first. And they said, well, let's look at our third. So I think it was the spring of 86, we opened up Williamsburg, and that took off pretty well, not as fast. And then we opened our fourth store in the fall of 86. So basically, in less than a year and a half, and I went from 1 store to 4 stores. And there I met my match. I was like, I was struggling to make them all successful, and with pre-computers, we didn't have computers back then. So we had what's called the one write system, where they're all handwriting all the payments and that kind of stuff. And I did that for 7 years. We got up to 5 stores, and then I bought my partners out. And at that point in time, I became, I think it was 1982. So I guess it was a total of 7 years. I became a franchisee with ColorTyme, and I own the 5 stores that I had opened up, became my stores at that point.
So you decided at the end of 7 years, this is a good idea. Now, just curious, this position that you got when you acquired that ownership, was it at a great price, or was it just at a good time where it made sense to, regardless of the price, this is where I need to be?
sweat equity. It was all sweat equity. I
Yeah.
had 22%, and the other two partners had 39. They put up the money. They pulled the clout. I just went and did the work. But I got to a point in 7 years that there was a partnership dispute, and I literally went to the bank and I said, I'm not worth a lot. Those guys are worth a lot more, but if I leave, they don't know how to run the stores, and they don't run the stores. So the bank, I encouraged the bank to loan me the money to buy them out, and I went from 22 to 100% owner at that point, largely because the bank, I said, if I walk out the door, I don't know about your investment. And the bank said, well, and literally I had a townhouse and a car, and that was about it. So they loaned me over $1 million to buy the other partners out. And then when I did that, there was a couple of sister corporations. I was able to acquire management to purchase 2 stores. I was in the process of opening, it took me 7, a process of opening an 8th store within like 4 months after this purchase. I started looking at another store, and then at that time, ColorTyme Corporate came to me and said, we have 3 stores here we think we could acquire in the Virginia area, and then another 5. And so literally within 9 months of me going from junior partner, I was the 3rd largest ColorTyme franchisee in the country with 16 locations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my $1 million debt went up 4-fold, so $4 million. I was young and dumb and didn't care. And, I was like, okay, well, what are they going to do? Take my townhouse and my car? So,
right.
I learned how to do it right. I guess probably the lesson here is I learned from the very beginning how to, what rent-own was all about. In my first 2 years, I went to quit like 3 times. Like, shouldn't I do something more with my career? But I was always challenged. And I understood people. I understood our customers. I understood our employees. I understood the business more from a financial stand because of my college education. So I was really good at doing business projections and talking to the banks, and they understood that not only could I run the store, but I could talk on their level too with, borrowing money and how that money would be repaid. And that's how it all happened, because every one of those things, while ColorTyme helped facilitate some things, the bank wanted to know where they were going to get their money back. And I showed them on paper how I was going to do it, and they trusted me in doing it.
So how did you go? So we have 16 locations in the early 90s. How did we transition to Premier? Where did Premier come from out of ColorTyme then?
Yeah, and that's another story. So then I had the 16 stores for a couple of years. We were doing really well. And then the finance company, Chrysler first, was funding ColorTyme Financial Services, which is where we actually got our money from, decided they wanted out of the business. And so while I was $4 million in debt, they wanted me to pay it off or find a new loan. I'm like, that's not going to happen. And so they squeezed all of the ColorTyme. If I remember correctly, ColorTyme had about $50 million loaned out through their organization, and they reduced it to $25 million in a year. And people like me essentially got pushed into a corner. And so I negotiated my way out. I sold back a majority of the stores, 11 of them. I sold them back. And the 5 original that I had, I left with. I financed them. They were actually financed at my original place before these new acquisitions were financed through ColorTyme Financial. And that's when I left the organization. I said, the organization failed me. I'd borrowed money and put a lot of things on the line to be successful with these stores. And I thought they were going the right direction. But with the bank pulling back on what they were willing to loan out and stuff, I was caught in a bad situation. So I said, fine. And when I negotiated my way out and sold back those stores to ColorTyme Corporate, who then sold them somewhere else, I'm not quite sure. I don't want to be part of this organization. So one of the other ColorTyme, the largest ColorTyme franchisee at the time, was a guy named Carlos Sardina. He had 26 stores based in Florida and Kentucky. And he had left 6 months earlier, seeing the same problem that I had, and he formed Premier. And so when I ran into my troubles with them and decided I want out, I joined up with him, and I was the first licensee at the time of the newfound Premier it was called Premier Rent to Own back then, but we coined it Premier Rental Purchase later. And shortly after me, about 4 other ColorTyme people in the next year joined us, and we quickly went to like 50 stores. But then there was industry acquisitions were going on by the time. Publicly traded companies were buying smaller publicly traded companies.
In the droves at that time, in the droves.
Yeah, it was, and the numbers were ridiculous, and pretty much everybody sold out except me. And so I said, fine, I'll just buy this corporate name and take care of it myself, because the name on the building was, not my name originally. It was Premier, and I didn't own the name, so I bought Premier, and then kind of just settled in with my own little core stores again. I didn't want to be part of the corporate roll up. And
so wait, let me back up
yeah.
just a little bit so I understand this. When everybody was selling, and you said you got to year 5, does that mean that the other premiers sold as well?
Yeah. So Carlos is 26 stores, my 5, and then 4 other franchisees. We added up to about 50. And so we were like a flash in the pan. All of a sudden, we went from Carlos started it with his 26. I joined on, 4 other people joined on. Within a year and a half, we're at 50. But then we became a target for the publicly traded companies who were acquiring and giving very good prices at the time.
Yeah.
And all of them took their money except me. I said, I don't really want to do this. I think there's a bigger future. So the 50 went back to 5.
Wow.
And I bought the name. So
right. At that point in time, everybody was gone. There was nobody to hold on to it.
Right.
Okay. And was that when it became Premier Rental Purchase versus Premier Rent to Own?
It did. That's exactly why. Yeah, we changed the name slightly, and there wasn't much what I bought. I really just bought the right to keep the Premier name. There wasn't really any tangible property or assets at the time. And I guess about a year later, this was a person named Wally Landmesser found me. He happens to be the longest standing Premier franchisee that we have. He came to me, I guess, in 1996 or 7, and said, I heard about you. I'd like your help in opening a store. And I said, okay, well, I can license you the name like I did. We were charging 1% at the time. And so I helped him. And then I think the next year, for 5 years in a row, somebody found me. I wasn't really marketing. They found me, and I helped them become a Premier licensee. So now I have my 5 stores and their 5 stores, basically. And then it started to pick up, and before I knew it, I actually sold my stores to concentrate on helping other people with their stores. And by like 2005, we had 16 locations that were all franchisees. I didn't own any store. I sold mine in this transition so I could focus on it. And I ran into a lawyer and said, you're really franchising. And I said, yeah, but I don't have anything really to sue. And said, you should think about it. And so they said, we'll convert from a licensing company to franchising, which is highly regulated. And it was quite expensive, a lot more expensive than I thought it would be. But I did it in 2005. Only 2 of those franchisees decided they all got their opportunity to go somewhere else or leave the organization. And 2 stores left. The others remained, and most of them are still in business with us today. And then we just grew from there.
Now, you said 1%. 1% is not a lot. Now, I understand that it's licensing versus franchising, but now, that model, and I don't know where it's at now, but I can tell you right now, 1%. I think everybody would be a franchisee of Premier if it was still that good. I would imagine it's not there now.
No, it's 5%.
Okay.
That's pretty much I think our competitors charge 6 and 7, but we're at 5. But 1%, we didn't do anything really. We basically, helped if we created a marketing, we shared things basically, but we didn't have a corporate staff. It was basically, I had my stores, they had their stores, we shared.
Right.
But it came to a point in which we all realized that all of us were going to go out of business as the industry matured, unless we started to do things we couldn't do unless we pooled our money together. And somebody had to take ownership of that. So we originally went to 3%, and then we eventually migrated to 5%. And, so that means I hired staff with the 5%, and we invested in technology and that kind of stuff. But really in 2000, 2005, we converted to 16 stores. And by 2009, we actually got up to about 63, I think it was 63, upper 60s locations. Now we'd also gone into wheels and payday loans on cars, not payday loans, but rent-owned cars. And we also got into cash services. And then 2008, if you all remember, was the banking crisis.
Correct.
And so we had 5 different brands at the time. So Premier had Premier Home Furnishings, Rental Purchase, Premier Wheelworks, Premier Auto by Rent, and You Getcha Cash. So 5 different divisions, basically, that were 60 some odd locations. So we went from 16 to 60 something, from 5 to 2008 or 9, somewhere in that ball. So it was, another roller coaster ride of massive growth. And then 2008, the banking crisis hit, and nobody was lending any money. And so I kind of say from 2008 to 2010 or 11 or 12, somewhere in that ballpark, bankers' lips were moving, but no money was changing hands. And so some of our people had a really hard time. We released the wheel industry. The industry itself kind of cratered. And payday loans got regulated by the Dodd-Frank regulation, so we got out of that. The car business never really took off. And then we were left with our home furnishing stores, which were big stores, 20,000 square foot stores, retail stores. There were retail and home furnishings, and their rent factor was like 20 grand a month.
Yeah.
When that hit, that period of time from 2008 to 2010, couldn't sustain those volumes. And so they all worked their way out. And then we went backwards again to about the 45, 50 store level, which is kind of where we're at now. And while we've had increases, we've had decreases at the same time. So that shook us out. And really about 2012, I guess from 8 to 12, we were just kind of hanging in there like everybody was, with the change of the banking crisis that occurred in 2008.
And it just kept on. So that's how many stores are in the actual Premier business franchise model right now is about 45.
47.
47. So you have 47 at the time. Now I got a question. You've done, even to this time frame that we're talking to now, we're talking about, we're at the 2008 to 2012 mark. When you're talking about 83 to that time frame, you've had upwards of 60 stores. You've had 4 different types of locations, whether it be tires or furniture or rent to own. You have all, the payday loans. So you have all of this. Was there somebody with you at that point in time that helped you as a mentor or helped guide you in this business that, really helped kind of through the years, just, a kind of like a soundboard, so to speak? And I wouldn't say one person, because there's sometimes there's several, but to do as much as you have, it sounds like a lot to do on your own. And kudos to you if you have. Was there anybody back then that kind of helped you and mentored you along the way?
Largely yes and no. Nobody directly in the industry that helped me. The industry's always been very helpful, and APRO has always done their part to provide good information and that kind of stuff. Dan Witzel, a CPA, who I had met him. I was introduced to him by ColorTyme people. He has been instrumental in our success. And he taught me what I didn't know about rent to own from financial aspects. And I tell a story which is very it's funny, but I had 16 stores back in the early days with ColorTyme, remember that. And they said, well, you really need to have a professional accountant. My brother was helping me at the time, but he wasn't a CPA by trade. So I went and go visit Dan Witzel, and I plopped down 16 financial statements. And he told me 3 or 4 of the financial statements that the manager was stealing from me. And I'm like, where do you see that on the financial statement? And I went back, and he was right on all of them.
No kidding.
And he told me something about almost every one of my stores. This one is, hanging on to old merchandise, and this one's doing this. This one's discounting the first payments, and this one's like. I'm reading the financial statement. And I'm like, I don't get it. Where do you see that? And I went back. And basically, I realized that the numbers, that was a huge turning point for me. that the numbers of the business, if and most people, sadly today, my franchisees don't look at their financial statements. They look at their cash balance and make decisions. And I guarantee you, most small business entrepreneurs look at their cash balance and say, if there's enough money in the bank account, I'm doing all right. But if they would learn to read the financial statements, they can decide from the financial statements where the weaknesses are and figure out how to improve them. And he taught me that. And that was a great education back in, what was it, 1992, 93 area.
I mean, Dan's been in this business for as long as I could remember. Probably another legend that I wish I had time to speak to. He's absolutely been around and seen so many things. Very, very respected as far as what he does and the amount of time that he spent in this industry. I agree with you 100% on that. That you could learn a lot if you know how. And I think some of the things come from that, as far as like people not doing it, owners, especially when you have a 1 to 3 store owner that's really more interested in kind of half and half doing ops, half doing the back end, and not really looking at the financials, is because I'm just saying this from a point of view of myself. I don't think they know how. Some people just haven't been like literally sat down and trained, and this is how you do it. This is what you're looking for, because they come from a place of operations, and not everybody does, but sometimes you get that person that comes from operations. They want to own it because they know it very well. They believe in it. They're very passionate about it. But running the business from outside of the business versus running it from the front counter are completely different situations. And I think that it could be more, it could be pushed more as far as the training and how they do, or just finding somebody to mentor them, like you were able to say, hey, this is what you're looking for. This is what you're going to see. This is what's happening. Yeah. And I'd love to see more of that go on. Speaking of that.
Well, just if I can capitalize on that, that happens to be my strength. I can, and I now know I can pick up a financial statement from any business, and not that I'm super at it, but it's not about the numbers, it's about trends and relationships. So if this number on the revenue line and this number on the cost line, and how are they changing over time, you can get a feel for the business. But when it comes to a rent-to-own store, I can now read a financial statement and tell you a lot, within 5 minutes, more than the operator even knows. And we teach that at Premier. In fact, that's how we grew Premier. The way I was able to grow the franchise, we didn't grow it like our competitors, Run the Center, Aaron's, Buddies, where we got massive amount. We got either rich people already had money, like Aaron's was. I heard one time you had to have the $6 million net worth to open up an Aaron's. Well,
oh wow,
you don't have to worry about if a guy's got that kind of money. Your banking is your problem. We provided the banking for every one of our franchisees. We're the odd franchise in the rent-to-own system. So I make it how I built my organization when it went from my 5 stores to eventually within basically 5 or 6 years to the 60 some odd. I got the funding for every one of my franchisees. So it's a service that I provide up front. Basically, I say, I will get you the funding you need. First of all, let's determine the funding you need. And maybe it varies from store to store. And, what are you going to pay yourself? How many employees are you going to hire? How fast you're going to grow? What do you think that, so all those variables inside the business, we put that in. I built this massive, unique worksheet. It's taken me decades to build, but it's the only one of its kind in the industry. And literally within probably 4 hours is what we do, I can build a plan for the bank. And then we modify it. And then with Dan Witzel's help, he reviews it, improves it. Then we put it together in a full write-up with pictures of the location, et cetera. I've had people in a bank and gotten the money I needed, $500,000 or more for a location within 48 hours.
I was just about to ask you that. So in the time frame that you'd say, let's say we're going back the last 3 to 5 years, what is the average cost of? And when I say average, I do know that it can differ from state to state depending on how big the location is and all that. But if you were to say an average, is it about 5?
No. When I first started doing this, more like 550, and now it's more like about 650.
About 650.
And there's some added cost of labor and things, and rents have gone up and stuff. But yeah, and yes, you could open, and I've seen stores open up below 5. but they're just doing a hook or crook or using their credit cards or whatever it is. To do it right, to do it all with bank funding, and to do it the right way, you need about what was 550, more like 630, 650 now, and it does vary by location.
And so, what is the average size store for Premier nowadays? Is it 5 to 6,000? Are you on the larger end of stores, or is it really just the franchisees, whatever they decided they want to do, and there really isn't an average size?
No, there's an average size. Most of our stores are somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 6. We have a few that are a little bit below 5, and we have some that are 7 or 8. 1,000 square feet is what you're talking about.
Right.
And then, the bulk of it is obviously the bigger stores are able to give more to the showroom. But we rent factor, basically, when you decide where you think the store is going to be, our average stores are the medium, okay, is about 70,000 a month. Okay. Where we have stores that are significantly higher and some that are lower, but the medium is about 70,000 a month. So if you say, okay, you talk to a seasoned operator, and most of the time I'm working with seasoned operators who are in the same market. They work for Rent-A-Center, work for somebody else, and they want to own their own deal. So they get a gut feel for what the business is going to do because they're already working in that market doing it. But if they say, let's say 8,000 or 80,000 is where they want it, or they think their store is going to be, for example. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, you used to want to keep your rent factor at $7,000 or 7% of that. It's now really about 10. So when we say, okay, well, if you think you're going to have an $80,000 store and you're pretty confident of that, we need to go out looking for a location that's somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 square feet that you're not paying more than $8,000 a month. 10% of what you think your estimated gross will be.
That's about, yeah. I'm just doing the math in my head as you're speaking, and I'm kind of going through the numbers, and I'm with you right there. I kind of agree with you 100% on that. So, help me out here, because we started at ColorTyme. You got in, you got up to so many stores, you backed out to your 5 stores, you grew it again, they took it out, you've grown it more. We come into the financial crisis. But then recently, I've heard that you've been able to acquire the last bit of I shouldn't say Rent-A-Center, the last bit of ColorTyme stores from Rent-A-Center, which basically means there's, and I could be wrong on this, but there's no more ColorTymes left?
Well, there are ColorTymes. They're just I now own the brand. So we're leaving them as ColorTyme. So I'll take you from where we last left off at 2012 or so. And I will say from 2012 to 2015, I kind of knew, even though we had 40, 50 stores, I kind of knew that if we did not make a direction, we would not sustain another decade. We had great operators, but we didn't have a lot of systems. And so in 2015 to 17 range, we made a massive investment into Premier University training programs, a lot of digital services, website development, because websites were coming along at that time. The websites are now a second door to your store.
Oh yeah.
So you have the front door and you have a door on the internet.
Correct.
A lot of that stuff. And then, if I get this right, somewhere around 2018, I got a phone call from Bud Gates, who was Easy Home. And they had 40-something stores. 20 of them or so were corporately owned by Bud Gates and investment group, and another 19 or 20 franchisees. And they didn't know what to do with the franchisees. They wanted to close up, and they were going to sell their corporate stores. So I acquired those stores, and they just had, that organization was, Bud, I think Bud didn't know where to go with in the future.
Right.
And I wasn't able to keep them. So there's only about, we went through a period of time where many of the stores closed or sold and bought me out. I became a franchisor essentially. And that 19 dwindled back down to a handful, and we still have those handfuls. They converted to Premier. And then, so that was another little boost for us. And then, then there was attrition. They didn't all. Most of them had gotten disenchanted with Easy Home. So by the time I bought it, they were like, listen, I just want out of the rent-to-own business. Like, okay, well, let's figure that out. And then, earlier this year, ColorTyme, Rent-A-Center, contacted me and said, would you like to buy the ColorTyme franchises that we had? There were 6 locations that were left, and these were strong operators that had been around for literally decades. Some of them, just about the time when I left ColorTyme, they were joining ColorTyme. And I said, absolutely. So it was almost, I have to admit, when I got the phone call, it was like deja vu. I started at ColorTyme and now I'm buying it.
Right.
And so it was, so as much of it as an emotional thing as it was, but there's 6 stores, 4 franchisee, great operators. We're excited to have them. And I think they're excited to be with us because they're no longer part of Rent-A-Center, which they were a fish out of water at Rent-A-Center. And for us, they're just like us. They're entrepreneurs. We're down to their level. So I think we're able to give them better support than Rent-A-Center was able to give them. And I think that they'll say the same thing.
Something that you mentioned earlier was that you were a different type of franchise, something a little bit out of the norm. And you seem to be doing it very well because you do have a set amount of stores. We're not talking about 1 or 2. So there's a belief in the Premier system. What would you say sets you apart and makes you that different type of franchise in the RTO network versus, let's say, you have buddies out there, you do have Rent-A-Center franchisees and others. I know R&R does franchises. What sets your franchise, in your mind, in your opinion, aside from them, and why would somebody say, you know what, Premier is like where I want to go?
Good question. And I would say that initially we were the only franchise in 2005 that would help you with your funding. Not only would we get the funding, but in some cases we actually provided upfront capital, like $100,000, and they would get the rest from the bank. So for just some people, it was that we helped them with the funding. With others, we looked for seasoned operators. We didn't look for money people. So, there were probably a lot of people who called Aaron's and they said, well, if you don't have $6.5 million, the conversation's over with, and that kind of stuff. So they could say, well, I'm a great operator. Well, good, work for one of our franchisees. So we were the only ones in that niche for the longest time. And initially we had a pretty hands-off model, which was, how to run a rent-to-own store, whether you came from Aaron's, Rent-A-Center, Buddy's, Rainbow, wherever they came from. And we kind of let them do it their way. But I will say that over the last 20 years of doing this, the last 5 or 6, more than that, 5 to 10, I would say, we started to realize that, we had some people that kind of did it the Aaron's way or the Rent-A-Center way or whatever, that it wasn't working. We as a franchise understand now that in order to be a successful franchise and to be successful, we have to make sure our franchisees are successful. And so they have to be putting money in the bank and for that to happen, they can't all be slightly different. They need to be more uniform. There's still a lot of autonomy that we give them. If they're fine, if they're making money, we kind of leave them alone. Right. But those that are struggling, we bring them back to the baseline. And a lot of them were successful because they worked for somebody, and therefore the card close percentages and some of these things are like, well, I'm working for myself. Some people work harder for other people than they do for themselves. And we have to remind them that shouldn't be the case. You should work harder for you, and whatever you produce goes in your bank account, not somebody else's. But some people do need they need a boss or something, or someone to tell them the ugly sometimes. And so I think as a franchise organization, sometimes what I'm doing is when people are challenged, I have a saying, when things are not going so well, quit lying to yourself. And when things start going well, you can start lying to yourself. I'll tell you that story. But the point basically is they have to be told the ugly. And they have to, those are terrible results and you're not doing it well, or you're whatever. And they need that kind of feedback. So what are we different today? We're still about the operator, and we always look to say, I know one of our franchisees is a franchisee of another system outside the rent-to-own, totally different. And he said that the franchise consultant comes around and he's all he wants to talk about is how to raise the revenues, because as the revenues go up, the franchisor makes money. But when he says, "Can you help me about my bottom line profit?" the franchise consultant doesn't really care. And so we do care. We care about your bottom line profit. We care about your profitability. We care about your associates. And so I would say we're much more in touch and much more active with our franchisees, because I'm a former rent-own guy,
Right.
not a professional franchisor. And so there's a different level of connectivity here. And that's what I think the ColorTyme guys loved about joining us, because I am connected with their business. I know their numbers as well as they do. My team knows their numbers as well as they do. Unlike before, where they were kind of on their own, they're a franchisee, but kind of like at McDonald's, you can be a franchisee, but franchisor just cares about their portion, not necessarily what you're doing all the time.
So out of all the 47 stores that you have now, how many out of those locations are owners? So I would imagine that some own more than one franchise location, correct?
Yeah, we have about 33, I think it is 33 owners, franchisees, and some are multiple two people own, partners. So we have a good amount of single store franchisees, and we have a handful, more than a handful, a good amount, I guess, of multi-store people, from 2 to our largest is 5.
So if somebody says, you know what, Troop, I love what we're doing here. I love Premier. I have this one store. I want to open store number 2, store number 3, whatever the case is. Do you also help them with the funding to get to those, or are you, I've got you the first one, you know what you're going through. This is your opportunity to kind of go out there and get this done yourself?
No, we help with every store. We also help with store transitions. So we have just now hit our 20th year of franchising. And I have franchisees that like, I love you, Trooper, but I've been here for 20 years. I want to do something different in my life. So we're helping them, and we have a standing $100,000 investment that to the buyer. So if a franchisee says, I want to sell, and I have a neighbor that wants to buy me, I will work with the neighbor to help him acquire the store, and I will put up $100,000 for the neighbor to help the current franchisee get out. At the price he wants, it's a reasonable price. But so and then we just work it out with the neighbor. And then the neighbor we're a junior partner in the business, and the neighbor can buy us out if that's what they want, or if they don't need our money, we don't offer it. So,
well, if you don't have to, right?
Yeah. So but I'm also I don't know, I of all the stores that we've ever opened up, I can only probably think of less than a handful, less than 5, that I was not involved actively in the funding. Almost everybody said, hey, let's do the funding. And we use mostly SBA 7A loans. And those loans are very favorable, long 10-year notes. And they're capped at 2.75 over prime. Sometimes we get better rates than that. And so yeah, we pretty much have coordinated all the funding, and we can go anywhere with that 7A note. It can be, and we probably have done business with 20 different banks over the decades who do those loans. But it's the federal program, so if you know how to pitch the loan, and you know how to provide what they need, you can pretty much go to any bank and get the money.
So I have a question for you, because I was looking at the map on the website coming into this, and I noticed that like a chunk, I'd probably say 85% in my visual opinion, is up in the Northeast. What's going on with the rest of the country? I see everybody's kind of grouped up a little bit north of, let's say, well, I don't know, maybe Virginia, going north all the way through to, to the top of, the east side coast, all the way north, and then a little bit over, by the Great Lakes. But I see it all over there. What's going on with the rest of the country?
Yeah, we have a stronghold from Nebraska right across the Rust Belt there, right on up into Connecticut. So it's just where the operators came from. We've had stores in Oregon and California, New Mexico, Alabama. We don't now. It really just came with the operators. And so we're franchise licensed to go anywhere in the United States. We've also looked at, franchising in Canada, which is very different. But bottom line is, someone called me from Hawaii and wanted to do it in Hawaii, I'd do it with them. But it's the
Make it
operators.
happen.
It just so happens. And it's also, if you think about it, that's where the population is too, you know. And then you got some not so friendly business states like California. Well, there's population in California or along the West Coast. They're not very friendly to or helpful to small business people. And this is not an easy business to get into, because the barrier to entry is, like we talked about earlier, $650,000. And you have to build up a critical mass. There are a lot of other businesses that are franchises that are service oriented. You just need a truck or two and small location and a telephone, and you can start making money. Right. So with us, you got to buy a lot of product, and so it's not as challenging as say at McDonald's, where you got to build a building and you got a several $1 million footprint and equipment and all that. But it's not as easy as say a service master. So we're right in there, and that's so really we just focused on the operators, and that's where the operators called us from.
So you said that earlier, you look for operators. You don't necessarily look for somebody who's looking to open the franchise. And, let's say I've got a couple $1 million. I want to open a couple, let's say a couple of stores. I'm looking at you because you know how to do it. You're looking for the people who have the passion, the knowledge, and the history in the business to get this open. So how do you, because you said you really kind of don't, at that time, you hadn't really been like advertising for that. They find you or you find them, but like, has that changed to more recent times that you actually are looking for people now to join the Premier family? Or is it, I'm here, we're doing a great job, and I will keep the doors open for anybody who wants to walk in?
Both, I guess. So in the early days, we had a website and people just found us. I mean, they would hear from their friend who went off. I have people in my organization now that they were both working at Rent-A-Center or something, and they both, one heard about us and he told the other, and then one joined and the other one's like, well, what am I waiting for? And then he joined. So there was a grassroots, I guess, it filtered from one person to another. When we finally kind of leveled out in from like 2012 to say 2020, we did try to market. We went to the International Franchise Association show in Las Vegas and all of that, looking for investors. So we're capable. I wouldn't have said in the early days we were not capable of helping an investor because we didn't have the infrastructure. But in that 2015 to 2018 range, we built the infrastructure. So if an investor came to us and said, I've got the money, we would certainly be able to help them. And we've actually got a new program that we're going to announce here at our convention soon about how to continue the franchise system and offer additional franchise. But I guess what I'm saying, I know how other people built their franchise. They went to money people. It just has never worked for us. Not that we wouldn't, but someone shows up, sure, we'd figure it out. But and we're capable. It's been our niche that deal with the operators.
So going back a little bit, because I want to make sure that, this is such a clean story, right? It goes through and you kind of tell us, what were some of the really big challenges that you had when starting Premier and then kind of going from there? You have your 5 stores, you changed the name over. What were some of the big challenges that you had to overcome at that particular point in time that might have even been new to you or new to the situation that kind of like, this is not good, but you were able to overcome and then say 20 years later, this is where we came from?
I don't know anybody that I would say so I've been in business now for 40 years, franchising, or been in licensing franchising for 30. I don't know anybody that's had a smooth sail. I think if you want to be successful, you just wait for whatever the next challenge is, and then you have to figure it out. I had one franchisee just tell me the other day, they have a new slogan called JFO, just figure it out. Okay. and so that's what we did. I mean, because in the early days, I grew from 1 store to 4 because I could handle it. And I could personally be at those stores, but then I realized I didn't have a system, and ColorTyme back then really didn't offer a system. if you know much about the industry, for 30 years, it's really changed. It was
Yes.
pretty, we had no computers, and now there's systems and processes and whatever. So, all of us had to grow along with the change in the industry. So there was that stage, and then there was the funding stage, and then there was the banking crisis stage where we were kind of like, oh, how do we pull this off? And so every one of those hurdles, when I bought Easy Home, it turned into a legal mess. So then there's the legal stage. I had to learn a lot about that and that kind of stuff. And so I've been around, and I've seen a lot. And I guess the answer is you just figure it out. And you don't really know what it's going to be. But you have to have that attitude that whatever it is, you'll figure it out, and you'll go find the resources and the people who can help you get through it that might have been through it before. But it's survival. If you want to be an entrepreneur, it's just survival of the fittest, basically.
JFO, right? JFO.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a new catchphrase. So, looking at the future, you said a couple things that I wanted to kind of go at. Actually, really, one of the main things was Premier University. You said that you've seen some of the areas that needed to be trained on, and you created something to help with that. Can you talk to me a little bit about Premier University and what that's about?
Oh yeah, that's a massive gem. There's some things I can look back and say we did it right. We invested heavily, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it took us 3 years to develop it, and we actually were a year and a half behind releasing it until it was right. But it is fully interactive. Started with a very big vision and just hung in there, because the dollars going out were just massive. In the last year, we had 7 people working on it every week, a different talented group to bring it to life. But what it did for us was it brought all of that knowledge that we had into a trainable, replicable, to repeat, mode, in the sense that now we all talk the same language. The moment it came out, and it took about a year for everybody to kind of get up to speed and trained, and we make sure everybody in our stores are qualified and certified, and we went through all of that process. It changed us dramatically. It made us stable. Before it was we were good because somebody at the front line was good. So Premier University, and now we keep expanding it to training for our corporate office staff, training. I hired a warehouse manager at one store, and we need a warehouse manager training program. How do you manage a warehouse? And so now that we've got it, we know how to add to it and add different series. But it has been one of the things that if we hadn't done that in that 15 to 18 period, I'm not so sure we'd be in business today, because we needed to. That's a traditional franchising that I said we morphed from, loosey-goosey. Everybody had autonomy a little bit, as long as you could be successful. And it's amazing how many nobody came to me who wasn't successful in rent-to-own, but then when they became a franchisee, they became unsuccessful at owning and operating their business.
It is different. It is very different.
Yeah. So once we did Premier University out, and then another thing we did was in 2000, let me back up for a second. In, I think it was 2016, 17, I had this guy named Angelo Gugucello who was working for an independent RTO company in Texas City, Texas. And not franchisee, but his owner ran into financial trouble, and the bank ended up with the bank. The bank ended up with the business, excuse me. So he contacted me and said, I'm tired of this. I've done this for 20 years or whatever. I want to own my own store. And, how much money do you have? I'm like, practically none. I said, okay, we'll figure it out. And we eventually bought what was a broke store in Texas City, Texas. And it wasn't making much money. It was ugly. It was in terrible shape, etc. We bought it, and over 9 years now, it is the largest store by volume and profitability in our organization.
Wow.
It is so well run. It's because of him. He's just great. And we did it on very little money. But in 2019, they had a part of the back room that had an upper deck, about 1,200 square feet. That was kind of a storage. They had like a big hole in the floor where they would, whatever, whoever had the building before us, it had a dumbwaiter or whatever. They lift things up to the upper story, but it was basically not used. We created we created a training center. It's our national training center above a store. So you kind of go up and you don't even realize you're in a store. It's almost like the Houston Center, the Houston Aerospace Center. Right. TVs everywhere. It's fully digitized. And we can Zoom people in and the training center. So we took what was Premier University and created a live training session. We're running live training sessions and programs there. And you walk down out of the center, and before you know it, you walk right into a store. So we created a training center and a store together. And it just so happens, thank God, that what was once a bankrupt store that nobody wanted, by the way, before the bank sold it to us, they called Rent-A-Center, Aaron's, everybody else. Everybody said, no, we don't want that. It's terrible. They didn't want it. They couldn't give it away. And they basically gave it to us at a cheap price. And then I'll say one more thing. Then when I realized we were going to send people down there to Texas, I live in Virginia, other people on my staff live somewhere else other than Virginia, and most of our franchisees are somewhere else other than Texas, that we started to host things, and the hotel costs were just killing us. So I ended up buying a house down there on the water, kind of nice because it's close to the water.
Nice.
It's our corporate house, and I couldn't imagine we did it for cost savings reasons, and I couldn't imagine what was gonna happen when I did it. But I will tell you that at the center, during the day, we're talking to the head. And then at night, we go to the house and we'll drink and party and look at the ocean and all that stuff. And it's what changes people is what happens in their heart. At night, they're kind of like, do I want to go back? Am I ready for this or whatever? All the events we do are generally multi-day events. So they come and they spend the night and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Usually a couple nights. The transformation happens at the house. It doesn't happen at the store. The store at the center, it's all about the information to the head. I can just tell you, I've seen it. You can almost see it. Some people kind of break into tears, or some people are getting mad at themselves. But it's at the house when we're in a relaxing mode or just chilling that you can just see the gears changing, and wow. Something sparks them and says, I'm going to go back and make my business better. You don't see it at the center. Center is too much information.
I'd love to hear that. I mean, I'd love to see it. I mean, honestly, that's, it's always those ideas that you've got to try, right? You've got to, you know that there's something missing, and you try different avenues, you try different things. And when you see them work, it's such a payoff, when you see it in real time, when somebody's struggling or somebody has ideas, and then you can see them turn, the light come on in real time, and them go back changed, and not always because it's always the information that always helps, right? The information always helps, and it's better to know everything that you can, but sometimes it's the person inside. It's what drives you, it's what fuels you, it's what gets you up and getting you to work every day. And when you can touch that, that's a huge thing. That's great to hear. I mean, congratulations on that. But I also seen, talking about getting ahead and moving forward, there is a Premier mobile app.
Yep.
And where did that come from? What was so I know that that's pretty much where everybody is headed. What can you do on the Premier mobile app?
Well, we got a version out there now, and a new version is scheduled for release at our convention. And literally, we're planning on you can do everything on the mobile app. From a technology basis, we took a decision 15 years ago, or actually maybe it was only 10, 12 years ago, when we first got cloud servicing or computing, when that first started coming out. Mm-hmm. And we made a decision, it seemed right at the time, and thank God we did, that we were going to try to consolidate all of our information on our servers. So whenever I talk to people in services or whatever, where's that information going to be hosted? And I said, well, no, either host it on our server, or we have access to download it from your server, depending on what third party we're working with. Bottom line is when you and we also excuse me, we're a SQL house. Basically, everything's in SQL. So when you bring all that information, we have HR data, we have marketing data, we have Versa-Rent data, which we use Versa-Rent at our stores. We have other data. When you have it all in one area, you can see things, or you can create reports, or you can create automation. So with the mobile app, more and more businesses going there. We probably all do our business with banking or whatever on the app. When you go on our mobile app, you can see live what the inventory is at all of our stores, and it's in real time. So if you sell something at a store, it comes off the mobile app. If you change the price at the store within a certain couple of minutes or whatever, it syncs. You change the price in Versa-Rent, it changes on our website.
Oh, wow.
So it changes on the website, but also changes in the mobile app. So we have the website. I look at the website as passive. The website does nothing for you unless you decide you're going there, or you click on a link that takes you there. A mobile app, once you get it downloaded, and there's some features in there that you need to download the app, like for example, bonus points, and that if they have the mobile app downloaded, it then calculates all their payments on time and stuff like that, and gives them points that they can use for different things. But most people just hit the redemption and say, send these points to the store, so when they show up to make their next payment, they have the points are there. They can use the points to make their payment. So if they download the mobile app, now it's not passive, it's active. We can communicate with them. We can send them push notifications. We can do things. We can tell them that this weekend there's a sale going on, whatever. And so we're still working through that technology. It's been very difficult, and it's been very expensive. But the idea eventually is that while we want people to come to our stores, they don't want to come to our stores. It's a pain in the butt for them to come to our store, right? They want to be able to shop and pay and do all their business from their couch.
Well, we're in an Amazon world right now. That's the way it is. And
so we hope they can pay their payments. They can it says schedule a service call. They can track a delivery that's coming to their house. We have some loyalty rewards things. We have some fun things that we do there, games that so the point is, yeah, we believe that our customer will become more of a digital customer, not because we choose to. We still prefer to come to the store, but that's just the way the world's gone.
It has. It's a digital world out there. It's really great to hear how far you and Premier have come, and sounding the way it is, as far as much as you put into it. You said you've been in the rent-to-own industry for 40 years. How much longer are you going to be in the industry?
5 to 10. So I've told even my team, my franchisees know that I'll be around for at least 5, but maybe closer to 10. But I'm transitioning to more of chairman of the board and out of CEO. Mm-hmm. And I've got some wonderful people that are working with me now, younger. This is an energy business. If you want a store to do well, you got to bring the energy every day, and it's no different. So when you bring my energy level is dropping as I get older, I guess. Maybe not my brain power, but my energy level is. And I'm trying to transition out of being CEO over the next 5 years or so, and be more active in the investment side from then on, helping people. And on the mentoring side, I love going to our Texas City training center and our corporate house, and then I have a franchisee that was one of my original franchisees from 20 years ago, and we helped him get in business and all of that. And about a year ago, he came down and spent a couple days with me, just one-on-one, and that's where we do some planning for additional stores or whatever the problem is. And we realized at the end of that, I thought, you and I have spent more time in 2 days together than we have in 20 years combined.
Oh, wow.
Because, we meet each other at conventions, we talk on Zoom, whatever it is, but the intense long-term interaction for 2 days, hanging out together, it is really meaningful, and I enjoy that. So I can do that for the rest of my life, and it's very rewarding when I can actually say that while everybody has a job, everybody so they can make money to take care of their family. I believe Premier has done a really good job of taking care of other people's families, and that's very rewarding to me.
Well, right now we're in a digital world, and sometimes it's great to remember that we are a society built, we are a social society. Being next to people, being close to people, being able to talk face to face, interact, problem solve, be excited to, it's not just going through the trenches, it's also through the highs and everything in between. You want to celebrate your birthday, you want to celebrate the successes with people. It's not the same over the screen. Just like when you're having a hard time, people don't usually go on the virtual world to tell you. They might complain on Facebook or TikTok nowadays, but if you want to get over that, that's a conversation. I don't know many people who have good sessions over, virtually. If you really want that close connection, it's something that has to be done in person, and I agree with that. Let me ask you a question, because
before you move off that, if I can add to that one.
Sure.
Now, when people say, "Why would I want to join Premier?" I don't even try to sell them anymore. I just say, "Look, if you're willing to pay for a plane ticket, I'm willing to feed you when you get down there, or whatever. Come for a couple of days, and I'll show you our store that was once bankrupt that's now massively successful, and you and I can hang out for a couple of days, and you'll just see it." And so I don't do it anymore because it's everything I try to say over the phone to somebody and why, whatever. Look, if you're really interested in us, take a couple of days of your time and a plane ticket, and then I'll show it to you. I won't sell it to you because it sounds so canned when you're trying to sell it to them. It's not real.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about. It's the digital world of trying to tell them over, or can you send me a brochure? Can you send me prospectus or what's called franchise disclosure document, whatever. So yeah, but you want to know who we are? Get on a plane and come see us.
Let me show you.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you in closing, what you have gone and done quite a bit from, running a couple of stores to owning a couple of stores to letting those stores go to growing this franchise that this franchise situation that you have as Premier Rental Purchase. You've had a couple of different businesses. You've had stores come, you've had stores go. You've had people who are, positively interested in the business do well. And you've had people who are interested in the business get out of the business because they didn't do so well. With all that knowledge, somebody that's coming in, somebody that is maybe in operations now that wants to be where Trooper Earle is, or an owner of their own situation, whatever that might be, what is the advice that you would give to them to say, you know what, if I knew this or these couple of things coming up in the time frame that I did, I think it would have made a huge, huge difference?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. So, my kids, I tell them about the same thing, and I tell prospective people the same thing. One, there is a statistic that's out there, and it varies, but basically somewhere around 90% of franchise owners are still in business after 5 years, but somewhere around 90%, 80, 90% of independent small business owners don't even make it through the first year. So if you want to be a business owner, there's a much greater likelihood of success being part of a franchise. You don't see too many McDonald's stores close, so they have these years or decades of building a system, and you come in with that system. So if I have great respect for the independents in the RTO business who, started or up their brand and they're still in business after 30 years. I don't know how they did that all on their own, because I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for initially ColorTyme and other people who helped me out. The other thing is, I would say, passion and energy. I just was raised in an environment where, I had passion. I have passion for this business. And you can tell passion by just the speed at which they talk, or the voice, the tone of their, or how they use their hands when they talk, whatever. Do they have passion in what they're doing? And can they bring energy to the business, whatever they're doing? Because if they can do that, in most cases, they'll be successful, I think. Obviously you have a certain amount of street smarts and book smarts to get through some things. And then I still believe it's a relationship business for us, and I believe most businesses are a relationship business. My relationship with Dan Witzel, it doesn't help me on a day-to-day basis, but he helped me learn some things that were very invaluable to me. my employees, my franchisees, their employees. So I would just say, pick if you want to be in an industry. Your chances with a good franchise, there are bad ones, is far greater than trying to do something on your own, unless you're creating an industry on your own for the first time. You know, you're in a you have an idea is its own industry. Number two, you know, if you don't love it and you don't bring the passion, I don't think you can be successful in anything. Or why do it, by the way.
Agreed.
And then the third is, technology is important these days, but your success will always be based upon your relationship with vendors or banks. The time to talk to a banker is when you don't need money. You know, so I'm telling, no, it's true. I follow bankers. I build relationship with bankers, and yeah, the time to build a relationship with your employees, or associates, and friends, and vendors. So.
Well, I appreciate the news. I appreciate the insight, and I appreciate you spending time with us today on this journey that we've spent, kind of discussing where you've been, where you've grown, where you've learned, and hopefully where we're going in the next few years. Guys, I appreciate you listening to us and Trooper Earle kind of just tell us what's going on with Premier Rental Purchase. If you have any questions, please hit me up at the show, Pete at the RTO Show Podcast.com. You can also just go to the podcast as far as the online and see what we're doing there. You can also buy some swag there at www.thertoshowpodcast.com. Make sure you buy some swag. You can also help out the show by becoming a sponsor. If you want to know more about us, you can hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where you're going to see this, where you can subscribe so you don't miss anything. Trooper, I really appreciate you being with us today. A lot of insight and a lot of understanding of where you've been and where Premier has been and kind of where it's going. And I really hope you much success in the next few years that you have. And I hope that you get to hit that director position, looking over and above and beyond everything, and kind of just getting everybody to understand that this is a passionate business. And when we have people who are looking to invest in us, that's the way to go. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys sitting us and listening today. And I will tell you guys, as always, get your collections low to get your sales high. Have a great one.